And next up, what we have is a very, very special keynote address for all of you. And for that, may I request Mr. Avinash Gupta, Managing Director and CEO India for Dun& Bradstreet, to come on stage.
Good evening, everybody. Uh, how's everybody doing? So far, so good. Uh, so we're a little bit back on time, so maybe I'll try to make up a little bit of time. Uh, so as Kaustav said, I'm the CEO of Dun& Bradstreet India, so good to see all of you. Good evening and thank you for coming. A big welcome to our 15th edition of the PSU and Government Summit. I've only been here for 3 of those, but we are on the 15th one. Some of our summits, we are now coming close to 3 decades of them. So a very commendable job on behalf of my previous colleagues and current colleagues at Dun & Bradstreet. Good to see many more people strolling in. We've got still a lot to go in the evening, so we try to manage that in terms of time. Dun & Bradstreet has been working with the government and PSUs in India for a very long time. So we came into India maybe close to 3 decades ago, just after the economy opened up. And one of the first things we did was, it was a specific request from the government, was to set up the bureau. So CIBIL, which is the bureau now, which everybody, I think the bureau, synonymous name for bureau is CIBIL. Nobody says a bureau report, everybody says a CIBIL report, which was started by us, by TransUnion, who owns it now, and State Bank of India and HDFC. So there were 4 shareholders. Bureaus are a funny business, they're a regulated business. So TransUnion specializes in that and they bought everybody else out. So very close working relationship obviously with the government. Even today we own a large stake in a rating agency. So rating agencies, I guess there was a reference to infrastructure funding and rating. So Equity, which is one of the 6 rating agencies around town, we own a large percentage, another large percentage is owned by SIDBI, and then State Bank of India and other banks as well. So we work with, we work with a lot of state governments. For some of you who may know us better, we have this concept of the DUNS number, which is a unique identifier. I guess, the easiest way to put it is nothing but international Aadhaar. But when some very smart guy thought of it 60, 70 years ago, and we have Dunsified the whole world. So, we've got what we call 535 million entities globally who's got a DUNS number. And hence, we are the largest B2B data carrier globally. So this DUNS number, a lot of the governments, state governments, central governments, MSME ministry are very keen to, and all of us on behalf of the country, are very keen to enhance their exports. So one of the key things this DUNS number can help you is to get credibility, visibility, possibly get access to financing, and all of the good stuff, and get access to new markets as well. So with a lot of the state governments, we work very closely in providing the linkage on the DUNS and hoping that the MSMEs can do a lot more in each of the ecosystems. So we've got a very close working relationship with the government and the PSUs. We work with many of the PSUs on a select basis, through tender, through RFP and all of that. So I think that's to give you a context of why I guess this event is so important to us. The PSUs are very important to us. Working with the government ecosystem is very important to us. So I think with that, let me share a few other thoughts. And maybe I'll go a little faster on some of the things I wanted to cover because I saw some conversations already happened around that. So, it's first of all, it's good to be here. And it feels good to share that, after a long time, there seems to be a growth mojo in our economy. I mean, all of us follow India very closely. I've been kind of a little bit maybe more fortunate. I've come in out of India quite a bit. And as I tell my colleagues, we are at this unique point in time where I personally do believe, and I've been in and out of India for also close to 3 decades. I look a lot younger than I am. But, we are at this unique point of time where things are fairly aligned. And if we can get this right, we may go a very long way. That chance maybe possibly comes once in a lifetime, and maybe that time is now. And we got to grab that tide and, move on. But the growth mojo, not only in the broader economy, but also in the central PSUs. If you look at some of the statistics in terms of, standalone income, grew by 35% approximately compared to the wider Nifty 50, which would be in the mid 20s. Similarly, in terms of top line growth, CAGR growth, 20% over the last two fiscal years. Net profits also in the 20s over the last two fiscal years. And surprise, surprise, in terms of the stock market as well, better performance by the PSUs versus some of the broader indices. So it's possible, it's doable. I guess if you do put your foot to the pedal and you get things right, PSUs can also outperform in their respective sectors and do a lot better. So I think my colleague Dr. Arun Singh talked a lot about some of the pillars of Amrit Kal, and I guess that's a challenge for all of us. The way I think we look at it, and maybe the government envisages the same kind of thought process. Being a very technology-driven, knowledge-based economy, that's where really the world would like every country to go. Every country would like to go as well, and built on I think what they were talking about, strong public finances and a great financial sector. And I think Arun talked about the 7 pillars, inclusive growth, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, youth power, and of course, everything, we like it or not, everything is related to finance. So obviously the financial sector. So, the first pillar, obviously, and I don't know how much they touched on, I came a little late, but, the whole business of inclusive development, very important. I mean, one can see that in the market everywhere. There is a K-shaped recovery in most countries, most markets. And that's fairly worrisome from where, we all sit. The big are going to get bigger, the wealthier are going to get wealthier. Then, there is not going to be long-lasting growth. You've got to get, the inclusive growth going, inclusive development going to continue that growth over the longer term. So clearly, the government talks about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and, in terms of facilitating that growth, inclusive growth, in terms of pushing capital to that. And a large amount of capital is committed, and I hope that gets good use and creates the kind of return on that capital. $50 billion, I think, in dollars still, and billions of dollars. That's a lot of money to put away, and hopefully that will, get the inclusive growth going. And clearly, in terms of as I said, in terms of attainment of this growth, this also needs to be across a wider mass of people to get that K to really become a much inclusive recovery. So, we talk about GDP per capita. I've been following India for a long time when the GDP per capita was, much lower than where it is now. I mean, everybody knows where it is now. So keep everybody awake. What's the GDP per capita? Sorry? 3,500 elephants, dollars. 3,500 is too high. So we are around 3.5 trillion and 1.4 billion people when we last counted. So around maybe $2,500. So $2,500 if you look at historical data, but very close, thanks. Yeah. So $2,500 when you look at Southeast Asia historically, interestingly, that's the number really when consumption took off in most of these countries. So in the economics world, $2,500 is a very good number because you believe at that point in time, average citizen has enough capital to kind of do consumption, which is what happened in Southeast Asia and many other countries. Now, where is China at? Pretty close, right? So China is at 11,000, right? So it's close to $20+ trillion of GDP, little less than us in terms of population. That's where you need to get to. And you need to get there very quickly, allied to the other point of youth, because if you don't get richer and you get older, then you have a bigger problem in life. So we've got a long way to go. You've got to go from $2,500 with a lot of people to get to at least a $10,000 number per capita. And that's how I guess when the Prime Minister talks and the government talks, that's how they've done the maths as well. So then of course you can afford to get a little slower in growth, but till then you've got to get there. So I think the inclusive growth, including distribution of wealth, very important things from all our viewpoint. And I think reaching the last mile, they were talking earlier about credit being available to the common man, to the MSME. So reaching the last mile on everything, right? Services, you really, COVID showed you across and very brutally to all of us that, you can't live in your own kind of hermit kingdom, right? So you got to carry the whole ecosystem through, and reaching the last mile, you got to make sure that things like that, the benefits of it get everywhere. Otherwise, it can really impact the entire economy. So I think inclusive growth, reaching the last mile, maybe leading on to infrastructure and investment, because that's what needs to happen. I think a lot of conversation again in terms of the infrastructure on building out the core sector, what we are seeing in railways, what we are seeing in roads, what we are seeing in highways. And I hope that, continues a long time. And key to that is, foreign direct investment. So every emerging market needed external capital to grow. Very rarely, although we are lucky we have decent savings, but you need external capital and a huge amount of external capital to grow rapidly. So, China at its peak was, getting close to, maybe $200 billion of FDI a year. And that kind of FDI propels itself after a couple of years to get you a 2% extra on the GDP. So, we are in the much lower numbers, much better. We are like 60, 70, 80 billion dollars, depending on how things are counted. But FDI is important. So, in the stock market today, the FIIs own close to around $660 billion they put on $660 billion money. That's a lot of money. And that's come over the last 30 years, right? So maybe $1 billion type a month average. So I think, when you look at infrastructure investment, you need to make yourself conducive that you can attract the FDI on a long-term basis. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So I think that's something to think about. And again, coming to that opportune point where India is, given what's happening in the geopolitics, what's happening in Europe, it's an opportune time to do the China plus one, the global supply chain disruption, which we see in our business. Because we are fortunate, we can see global inquiries. So it's 535 million people are checking on each other. We can see where the inquiries are happening. We can see the inquiries are evolving more into Asia on India, more on Europe and India than just on North America on India, which was historically. We can also see the types of people who are inquiring. Also, what's happening in geopolitics, what's happening now in other parts of the world which are aging. There are no people to work. So I'll give you a personal story. 2 weeks ago, I went to Europe. I flew my favorite airline, British Airways, and I took 6 flights in that 1 week. All 6 were late. And all 6 were late, not because of any other reason, because there aren't any people to work. There's not enough check-in staff. There's not enough staff to, do stuff, which is sad. And, UK has its own problems on Brexit because people have left. They don't have people. And the last flight was the Heathrow to Bombay flight, the return flight. So I was taking the 920 or 940 BA flight from Heathrow to Bombay. And it got cancelled. And it got cancelled last minute. So you're sitting in the lounge. The flight was 9:40. It was announced the flight's late. It'll go around 10:20. 10:20 in Heathrow. Has anybody flown to Heathrow recently? No. Very smart, I think. Yeah, you have. So Heathrow and many European airports actually shut for the night. Did you know that? They close for the night. There's too much noise. Good evening, sir. Come in. So they shut for the night, and people go home. They put a lock on the airport. So at 10:20, there's an announcement on the lounge that the lounge is shutting at 10:30 because the last flight airport shuts at 11. So they shut the lounge at 11. The lounge is shutting. Please leave the lounge. They're not concerned, right? So you're sitting in the lounge. So you ask, what's going to happen to the flight? Don't know. So 10:25, the announcement that the flight's boarding, and this is one section of Terminal B, Terminal 5B section where you can see the boarding. So you go down. They tell you actually it's not boarding, the flight's cancelled. So this is the first time I've flown a lot in my life. This is the first time an international flight is cancelled. So in Heathrow, when a flight is cancelled, you actually have to become an arriving passenger again. So you leave as arriving passenger. I'm a little lucky. I'm British by nationality. So you have to do immigration again. So I just face a camera and I'm out in a couple of seconds. But everybody else had to go into immigration line. And if you have seen the immigration line in Heathrow, you will not laugh at that. So you do that. You pick up your check-in. Pick up your bags which you've checked in. You go out and BA tells you, please book your own. But book it yourself. This is now at 11:30 at night. And you've been rebooked for the flight which is at 9 o'clock the next morning. Again, because I guess we all are a little organized, I could figure out a hotel. All the hotels around Heathrow are already full. and you can figure it out possibly and come back. Imagine all the old people and all the people. And sole reason why that flight had to be cancelled because the airport shuts at 11. So later I found out that plane had come from Serbia. There was a little of kind of icing at the base of the plane. When the pilots came to check it around 9:45 or whatever, the pilot said, I can't take off with this. This has to melt. And if you had maybe given another half an hour, it would have melted. But the airport shuts. You can't change it. So, in terms of India, we're very lucky. The point I'm making is that, we are there in terms of the work's going to come here. So, we ourselves at Dun & Bradstreet in the last, over COVID, we set up our own kind of GCC, Global Capability Center, which, a lot of you guys will follow, where we now got close to 1,000 people. So we created 1,000 jobs here, which have come from somewhere else. Because people aren't willing to do that work, or they're not willing to do it with that much urgency or, efficiency. So if you follow the IT sector services exports around $250 billion. Out of that, $80 billion come from GCCs like ourselves, which is work, Goldman, Jamie Dimon was here 10 days ago, all the banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, Barclays, all these guys. So what I'm saying is that we are really at this opportune time that if we can get things going, we may be able to sustain that growth and have that GDP go up to whatever you want to go in terms of the $10,000. So I think FDI important. That's the point I wanted to make through a very long story. And the next bit is about, digitization. And maybe on digitization, Mr. Rajneesh Kumar just walked in at the right time, ex-chairman of SBI Bank. And we'll chat for a little bit. But he's the father of YONO. So digitization, SBI has done a lot of digitization in the banks. And Anuj is here from Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain, is a storage company. It's a New York listed storage company. The days I grew up, Iron Mountain was about boxes of paper, right? In the HSBC bank I worked, anyway, you called Iron Mountain, they'd give you a box of papers, they'll pull out from. Now there is no box of paper, right? It's all digitized, and it's quite scary the amount of digitization, Iron Mountain and other companies do in terms of storing, processing, claims and stuff. So, that's the way to go. I guess a long way in our Indian context. We are partners with many people in India, including ONDC. ONDC is a great idea. It's a great platform. It's a great connector. And I talked about this DUNS number, and we are really hoping that this DUNS number will help the ONDC ecosystem kind of become more efficient and kind of pull things together. Arun talked a little bit about sustainability. Obviously, again, very important. I personally believe that the battle for the 2 degrees is going to be made or lost in India. We like it or not, because we are a lot of people. I think there were a lot of questions on charging, and at the end of it, everything is going to be coal for a long time to come, like it or not. So, the whole bit around sustainability obviously is very, very important. From our point of view, we picked on ESG and sustainability quite early. So, we've got ESG scores on something like 75 million companies out of those 535 we have in our data cloud. And in the Indian context, we have ESG scores on 1.5 million companies. Again, those are very important for the ecosystem. Large corporates want ESG scores on the suppliers. Walmart, Amazon, when they're dealing with people, want an ESG benchmark on who they're dealing with. So these are very important things. With SIDBI, in partnership, we have a Sustainability Perception Index. It got mentioned in Parliament a couple of weeks ago as well. So it's an index where we are giving the perception how MSMEs are perceiving it, how prepared they are. And it's obviously a long journey. I think Arun also talked about youth power. So again, youth power, I guess I talked about the demographics. Again, at the lucky point for us, we have a demographic dividend right now, and maybe it's got a long way to run, maybe 3 decades or so till, we'll have a young population, but we all will age. We all will get across the hill. And again, we got to make the economy a lot stronger, a lot bigger before the aging starts happening. So if you follow Japan, Japan had a decline in population last year of 1 million. Japanese population is degrowing, and last year it degrew by 1 million. And there are not a lot of people in Japan. It's only 120 odd million people. So nearly 1% of the population is less. So it's interesting that, how countries and economies, same with Europe, right? I mean, in Italy, the population is declining. You really do not know who will pay your pension and who will pay for your health services. These are going to be very tough challenges for all of us going forward. But India is again in that lucky spot with that demographic dividend. And we got to convert that into an opportunity before it becomes a challenge. There was some talk, a lot of talk on finance. Again, from a finance point of view, everything boils down to finance, and obviously, financing is available, capital is available, provided you do a lot of the tick boxes, which we've talked about, and we'll talk about maybe in the corporate governance session as well. And keeping all those kind of things, ducks lined up in a nice row, can make capital available. Capital is available, believe it or not, because they don't know where else to go. In currently interest rates have gone up, but interest rates will come down. But India can afford to give a higher return, provided you're able to make that situation happen for the country. Some of us have to sing for our supper every day. So this week I've been talking every day in the evening. So my throat is really drying up. Sorry about that. So I think those are the 7 pillars. I think I gave you a fair perspective of me, Dun and Bradstreet. What do we think about that? We are a partner in pulling all that together, and we hope that we'll have this journey for the next 15 years as well, which we're celebrating today. So the awards really recognize the key achievements of the central as well as the state PSUs. As a step ahead this year, we are also facilitating relevant ministries for the exceptional work towards enabling a robust roadmap to achieve the Amrit Kal goals. We have a publication which we'll release, the Dun and Bradstreet Top India's Top PSU, which I mentioned is in the 15th edition and is regarded as one of the most credible and comprehensive compendiums of the Indian PSU sector. This is, as I said, part of our continued commitment to recognize the efforts of the PSUs and the government in India. So I was standing at the back listening to some of the sessions. We've had the great, interesting conversation so far. We still got some discussions to go. We're a little behind on time, and I'm also eager to share the stage with the winners of the Dun Bradstreet PSU Awards. And I'd like to thank all our partners who pulled this all together. And we look forward to continued participation and patronage in the future. Thank you.